Recruiters waste hours every single week copying information from their calls into their ATS system. But with one simple N8N workflow, you can automate the whole thing. From call summaries to follow-up tasks, this workflow handles it all. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to build it, step by step. This is a system that we built for one of our clients a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was a cool build, so I reached out to them and asked them if I could feature it on the YouTube channel, and they agreed, so now here we are. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to be building today. First, the recruiter is going to call a candidate from their ATS system. In this case, we're going to be using Crelate as the ATS system and Zoom as the dialer. Next, the recruiter is going to have a conversation with the candidate, and that conversation is going to end. As soon as that interaction is over, we need to create any call summaries, activities, or follow-up tasks in the ATS system. This can include a missed call, a successful interaction, a dropped call, and any task that the recruiter needs to do later on. This is so that if you have multiple recruiters working on the same system at the same time, none of them will mix up their interactions and potentially agitate a future candidate. This is an advanced level build, so if you're just beginning with N8N, I recommend that you go back and watch a few of my previous videos before you watch this one. That being said, let's dive into a brief overview of the workflow and then we'll jump into the details. Alright, jumping into the workflow. First, we have here our Zoom webhook validation. Zoom validates its webhooks every 72 hours. Therefore, we had to make a sub-workflow inside of this workflow to be able to validate those webhooks. If Zoom, for whatever reason, is unable to validate the webhooks, the workflow will stop working. So, we made sure we put that here. Next, we have these first 5 nodes. Now, they're responsible for getting the event, whether that be a call or an SMS, and routing them to the appropriate portion of the workflow. All the calls will be going to the top, whereas the SMSs will be going to the bottom. Since the SMS workflow is a little bit more simple, I'm going to cover that first. First, we're checking to see if we've received the SMS or if we were the ones that sent the SMS. Next, we check Crelate to see if the contact exists, and if the contact doesn't exist, we do nothing. The client didn't want us to create a new contact, so we simply do nothing. If the contact exists, we're going to grab all of the SMS notes for that contact. Now, why are we doing this? Because instead of creating a new note for every single SMS sent, we want to create one note with the entire conversation. The reason why is because we don't want 1,000 notes on one contact. We want one note with the whole conversation. Now, of course, there is multiple different representatives that could be reaching out to this candidate. So ideally, we want one note per conversation per representative. So if I reach out to a candidate, that is one note for the entire conversation. And if somebody else reaches out to the candidate, that's another note for the entire conversation. So because of that, we grab all of the SMS notes for that conversation, and then we check to see if the conversation already exists or not. If there was no conversation that exists, we simply create a new conversational note. And if the conversation already exists, we grab the conversation history, we add the new message to the conversation, and then we put that into Crelate. Next, jumping into the call workflow, the first thing we're going to do is check to see if the call was inbound or outbound, and then check to see if the contact exists in Crelate. Again, if the contact doesn't exist, we simply do nothing. Next, we're going to see if it was a missed call or not. If it was a missed call, we just go ahead and create that activity right there. And if it wasn't a missed call, we then check to see if the recording exists for the call. Now, if no recording exists, again, we just make a quick activity based on whether it was an inbound or outbound call. And if the recording does exist, we are going to grab the recording, get the transcription, and then use AI to make a summary of the recording and generate any tasks or action items that were discussed while on the call. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to upload the transcription to a OneDrive so that we don't have to add it to Crelate and create a bunch of mess and chaos. Then we're going to create a Crelate event with the call summary, the link to the call transcription, and if any tasks exists, we'll create them, and if they don't, we simply do nothing. Now that you guys understand what we're trying to accomplish, let's jump in and actually build this workflow out. But if you want to skip the tutorial, I do have a link to download this workflow down below. Let's start by connecting all our credentials. To get started, jump into marketplace.zoom.us/user/installed. I'll leave a link down in the description below. Let's click on Develop, Build App, and Server to Server OAuth app. Click Create. Give it a name, click Create. Now that we've created our app, we're going to need the account ID, the client ID, and the client secret. So copy those three. Let's jump over to N8N. And here on this first edit node, double click and just add them here, here, and at the bottom right here. Once that's completed, go ahead and go to Feature, scroll down, and let's click on Event Subscriptions. Let's add a new event subscription. We'll give it a name. And our endpoint URL is going to be this webhook right here. Now here I'm putting it as test. We're gonna do the production URL and make sure it's active when you do this, okay? Right now it's inactive, but ideally when you're doing this, it needs to be active, okay? And we're going to use the production one. And we need to make sure that this webhook is using respond to webhook node. That's really important. Make sure it's a post method with a path test. Now this webhook and this webhook have to have the same exact path. The difference is the response. This one responds immediately, but it has the same path and it's also a post. This one, the only difference is respond to webhook node. So let's grab this link here for the production URL. Make sure that this is active. All right, now in order to validate the URL, we have to actually encrypt a key and send it back to Zoom. Bit complex, so I'll show you how we did it. Go into N8N and create a crypto node. So if we go add node, we type in crypto, it's this first one right here. And if we jump into the configuration here, we want it to do HMAC with type SHA-256. And we're gonna grab the body payload plain token from the Zoom response. We're going to use property name data here. And we're using the secret from the Zoom that we got earlier and with encoding hex. Now, I know that's complicated. All you need to know is it encrypts the key they send us and we send it back for validation that it's the right server. Next here, I have a quick set node to set the JSON of the next node. It just makes it a little bit easier on the next node with the name body. And I'm saying the encrypted token is the data of the last one and the plain token, which is the one we received, is the payload that we got from the webhook. Then I have a response webhook node here. We're responding with JSON, JSON.body, right? Response code 200 with content type, application JSON. Beautiful. So once you have all that set up, you go back to Zoom and you can click validate and it should validate your webhook just fine. Now, I'm not going to validate the webhook in this video, but at least you know how to do it. Once that's validated, we have to add the events that we would like to follow. So we go to event types, we scroll down to Zoom phone, and we add all the permissions that we would like to see. For us, that's a missed call, a rejected call recording is completed, SMS sent and received, and a few others in here. Just select the ones that you need for whatever automation you're doing. Once that's done, click continue, and you should be good to go. Let's connect OneDrive. If you're running N8N on N8N.io cloud, then all you have to do is sign into your Microsoft account. However, if you're self-hosting, it's a little bit more complicated. So to get started, go ahead and go to portal.azure.com/this long link. I'm gonna leave it in the description below. Next, click new registration and let's give it a name. And here we're going to want it to be multi-tenant. Now, if you're using a personal Microsoft account, you don't need to do this, but for a business account, multi-tenant is really what you're looking for. And next, we're going to add our redirect URI. So go over to N8N, go up, click Create Credential, search for Microsoft Drive, click Continue, and grab this URL right here. Next, paste that in and select Web. Now click Register. Beautiful. Now we're going to want this client ID right here, this first one. So let's click Copy to Clipboard, go back to N8N, and we're going to paste it as the client ID. Now, for your client secret, we're going to go back to Microsoft and click down here under Manage. You want to go to Certificates and Secrets. Create a new secret, give it a name, give it a time, and click Add. All right, now we're going to grab the value right here. So copy that to the clipboard. We'll go over to N8N, we'll paste that in and click Connect My Account. Now select the Microsoft account you'd like to use. Once you've selected the right account, give it the permissions, and you should be good to go. Now we need to connect ChatGPT. So go ahead and go to platform.openai.com/API-keys. Link is in the description below, and click create new secret key. Give it a name and click create key and go ahead and copy that. Let's go back over to N8N. Let's create an AI node and click plus on the chat model. Let's click open AI. Click here, click create new credential. Let's paste the API key in and click save. And you're good to go. All right, the next thing we need is our Crelate API key. That one's really easy to grab. We jump over to crelate.com/go/user/user API. I'll leave a link in the description below. Mine has sandbox in front because we were using it to do some testing. That being said, yours won't have the sandbox. Next, all we have to do is click enable API access and copy the key. Once we've got that key, jump over back into N8N, jump into this edit node, and drop the key right under Crelate API key right here. You should be good to go. If you're learning N8N and would like a little bit of help, I'm hosting a free community to help you guys out. There we have challenges to earn some real cash money. I also answer any question that gets posted in the group. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out the link down below. Now we can start building the real workflow. So to get started, just copy and paste this webhook node here. And like I said, just change this respond down here to respond immediately instead of using webhook node. Keep the URL exactly the same and you should be good to go. Next, let's create an edit node for all of our API keys. This you probably already have done because you already have all the API keys collected. Next, we have a code node, and this is to encode the Zoom credentials, okay? So we grab our Zoom client ID and our Zoom client secret, and we encode it using base64, and then we return the encoded credentials. Next, we have to generate our access token inside of Zoom. So we're doing a post method to this URL right here, zoom.us/OAuth/token. No authentication here, and we're sending headers with content type application /x-www-form-URL encoded. We also have another header parameter called authorization, and we call it basic space, and we add the encoded credentials from the last node. We also are sending a body here, body content type from URL encoded, using the fields below, one called grant_type with account_credentials, and the second one as account_ID, and we grab that account ID from the edit node a couple of nodes back. And just like that, we have all of the tokens that we need to do the workflow. Next, we have a switch node to route the calls up and the SMSs down. So if we jump into that, here we can see that we're grabbing from the webhook object.item.json.body.event. And that's going to be the same for all of them here. We only have 3. And the first one will be call. The second one will be phone.callee_missed. And the third one is SMS. And if we jump out, we can see that the call and the missed call is routed up and the SMS is routed down. Now let's cover the SMS since that's the simplest workflow. First, we're going to check to see if we received the SMS or if we were the ones that sent the SMS. The reason why is because the Zoom response stays the same no matter what. So we need to switch it back and forth in Crelate. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we receive the message, then the received column will be us, and the sent column will be the candidate. Whereas if we send the message, then the received column will be the candidate and the sent column will be us. Because Zoom doesn't change the API format, we need to put these if nodes in place so that we make sure we document the notes correctly. So jumping into that if node, the only thing we're checking is if the body.event is not equal to phone.sms received, which means if we received it, it goes to the bottom, and if we sent it, it goes to the top. Okay. Now, if you check these, we're setting the variables of the sender phone number, received phone number, the message, and the timestamp. And I have an extra variable right here called received, which is a Boolean true or false that we use later. Now, you can grab these from the webhook object, just the same. You just drag and drop it over, right? And here on the bottom, it's exactly the same. The only thing that's different is this and this switch, okay? That's the only difference. These two are exactly the same besides those two. So here we're grabbing payload object sender.phone number. Here we're grabbing payload object two members 0.phone number. We're grabbing the message, which is body.payload.object.message. And we're grabbing the timestamp, which is body.payload.object.date_time. right? And then of course the Boolean on the top is false, and the Boolean on the bottom is true. Then we put one final edit node here. And this edit node here is just grabbing the data from the previous node. Now, why do we do that? Well, because if right here I want to grab some information from this node and I drag and drop it, what happens is if it goes on the bottom flow here, it will break because I'm referencing a node that was never ran, right? So we need to create a node after this switch to create the variables so that any node following this, maybe this node right here, can grab information from this node without breaking the workflow. So jumping into that, you can see we have sender phone number, receive phone number, message, and timestamp here. And you can see we're just grabbing from the previous node. So this will work no matter which node is triggered. Next, we're grabbing all the contacts in Crelate by SMS using app.crelate.com/API3/contacts. Now the weird thing about Crelate API is you have to use the API key twice. Quite strange. I'm not sure why. So we need to send query parameters with the API_key, grab the API key that we set earlier, and we have to send headers with API_key with the same API that we set earlier. Next, we're sending the body and we're specifying it using the fields below, using phone_numbers, and we're grabbing the received phone number, which is under this variable right here. Next, we check to see if the contact exists or not. So the only thing we're checking to see is if this ID number, the first ID number in the list, exists. If it does exist, we go down, and if it does not exist, we go up and we do nothing. Next, we grab all of the notes for that contact. Now, I explained why a little bit earlier in the overview, so I'm not going to explain that again. But we use app.crelate.com/API3/activities to do that. And we send our parameters with the API key. Here we're adding parent IDs as well. Now, the parent ID is actually contact ID. I don't know why Crelate calls it parent ID. Their API really sucks. But just understand that this is the same ID that we grabbed from here. Next, we're passing a verb ID, which is the ID to the activity that we are using. So in Crelate, you have a bunch of different types of activities. You have calls, you have SMSs, you have tasks, you have different types of activities, right? Each of these activities have their own ID. So in order to get those ID numbers, I actually have an extra node right over here hanging out. Now this node right here, all we're doing is getting activity types. So we just do a get method to this URL, API3/activity types, right? We pass our API key twice because Crelate does it same way as we have been. And it gives us a list of all the activity names and the activity IDs so that you can then use that to create any activity that you want within this workflow. Since we're doing the SMSs, we are filtering it by the SMS activity type, which for us is a note. So right here, we're just filtering it by that type, and we're simplifying the JSON because this JSON right here brings a lot of information, a lot of extra stuff we don't need. So we use this code node to just make sure that it filtered right and refine out the information. Of course, you can copy paste that. I'll leave that on my website. Next, again, we're filtering whether or not it's received or sent. We're using the Boolean that I created earlier over here. And these two flows work exactly the same. The only difference is whether or not we received the message or we sent the message. And I'll show you the differences when I'm done explaining. Here, what we're doing is we're filtering by the phone number to get the conversation that was had. We're using the representative's phone number to find the conversation in the notes. And because the representative won't be adding his phone number under that activity type, we can use it to filter the conversation and grab all of the previous messages that happened between that candidate and that representative. So this is just filtering to find the right note that we're going to work on. If that note exists, we go up. And if that note doesn't exist, we go down and we just create a new note. So you can look here, all we're doing is checking to see if the JSON is not empty. Of course, if it doesn't exist, we create it using a post method to /activities again, using the parameters API keys, same as before. Difference is we're adding SMS and we're saying that it was an SMS that happened between these two numbers. This is the first number that we're formatting using .replace all. We have to remove any extra characters so that the number looks proper. right? And the phone number of the candidate, right? We give it the date that it happened, and we give it the message that happened. We said completed is true. We mark it as an engagement. Now, of course, this depends on whether you want it as an engagement inside of Crelate. We say when it happened. Then right here under parent ID, this is your contact ID, right? So we make sure that we grab the contact ID from the Crelate, and we're using the verb ID that we grabbed before, which is the one that we use for SMSs. So to show you where all this comes from, these two come from our setting variables, right? So if we go back here, setting variables, they come from this node. The next one right here is just creating numeric date, which is now, and then the final one comes from the webhook using the name and the message. And those both come all the way back, okay? Then we grab our contact ID number right here, and we're grabbing that from get contacts. Now, if the conversation already exists in the activity history, what we're going to do is grab it and replace any characters, because the way we grab it and try to send it back, it will create errors. So we need to clean out the blank spaces and add /ins so that it's formatted correctly. Of course, you can just copy paste this code, really easy. Then what we're going to do is create a new note. Now this is going to be almost exactly the same as the previous one. The only difference is we're also adding the text from the previous note. So we'll have the conversation history up here, and then down below, which is right here, we'll have the new message that was sent. Everything else is the same. And then we delete the previous note by ID, which we're grabbing from our filter right here. So if you check out this filter, filter by received, we're grabbing that item and deleting that item. Why? Because in Crelate, it's a lot harder to edit a node. Their API sucks. There's not a really good API for that. Now, this bottom one is exactly the same. The only difference that changes is the order of this API call here. So here, we're grabbing the rep and the message, right? Which is flipped, as I explained earlier. And here, it's the same thing. So that is the SMS workflow. Now let's jump into the call workflow. First, we're checking to see if the call was inbound or outbound for the same reasons as we checked in the SMS. Then we're going to get the contact by the phone number. Now this is exactly the same as this node right here. Same endpoint, /contacts, API key twice, right? Searching by phone number that we grabbed from the webhook. Then if the contact exists, which is if the data exists, right? We're going to check to see if it was a missed call. And if the contact doesn't exist, we do nothing. Now, if it was a missed call, you can check here. If the switch contains missed, so we're checking right here, if this was missed, then we're just going to create the note automatically. Of course, we're doing the same activities as we did during the SMS. The only difference is now the verb ID is going to change for a communication with the candidate. Now, remember I showed you how to get those verb IDs earlier, so I'm not going to explain that again. So for this one, we're saying it's an inbound call that came from this person in Crelate, and they called this representative, which we grabbed their name from the Zoom webhook, right? Body, payload, object, callee name, okay? At this time, which is now, and it was a missed call. We're putting the contact ID, which we grabbed previously, and the contact title, okay? That's all that's going on there. Now, if the call was not missed, we then have to check to see if the call was recorded, okay? If the call was not recorded, we'll go down. If the call was recorded, we will go up. Again, we'll check to see if it was inbound or outbound. These two calls are almost exactly the same. It's just switching one thing. And here we're saying it was an inbound call from this contact name in Crelate, first name and last name. And they called the representative from Zoom at this time right here. Now we're adding the duration. What we're doing is we're just taking the first date of the webhook and we're minusing it by the second date. Why? Because Zoom doesn't give good durations. You have to do the math. You didn't have to cut me off. Like we were nothing. I don't even need your love, but you treat me like a stranger and I feel so loved. There is no duration in the Zoom API call. Why? I don't know. These APIs, these engineers, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing, man. So anyways, we do some simple math to see how long the call actually took. We said when it took place, we grab the contact ID and the title, and we're good to go. And of course, this is exactly the same. The only thing that is changing is we're saying it's an outbound call instead of an inbound call, and we're saying our representative called this person. That's the only difference. Now up here, the only thing we're doing is we're setting an extra node. Of course, it's saying it doesn't work because we haven't executed it yet. But we're setting up an extra node just to help us out later on in the workflow because things get a little bit confusing. So it's easier to just set this node here. It's just organizational purposes. Doesn't serve any functional purpose. You could delete it technically. Next, we're going to get the recording. So for this, we're going to use this URL /call_logs, and we grab it by call ID /recordings, okay? And we pass the authorization token that we created earlier. And then we have to wait in order to download it. So this just gets the recording status. Instead of checking the status in a loop and stuff, we realize that it takes about 15 seconds to get the transcription, right? So we put a 15-second wait here and then said, let's download the transcription. Now that being said, occasionally there's a really long conversation that takes more than 15 seconds. So what we did was under settings here, we said, let's retry up to 3 times for 5 seconds. Hasn't broke. Huge call volume. More than 60 agents are using the system. It's working really well. That being said, we're going to grab this API endpoint with a get recording transcript download, and we put the name of the recording ID, and then we put our bearer token again. And what we want here is options. We want our response format to be a file that we put in the data field. Okay, that's really important. Next, we take that data field right here, we decode it using base64 and we parse it into JSON. So basically we're just taking a bunch of bytes and we're turning it into something that humans can actually read. Okay, next we have our AI node, and this is the only AI node we're going to be using. Now we have a really long prompt in here, but I'm just going to explain it to you right now on the call. Basically, it rewrites the transcription into a summary, and then it grabs all of the tasks or action items that were discussed in the call and creates those. It then separates it into a JSON and gives us the response with a subject, a body, an email if an email was provided, summary of the conversation, any tasks, and when it happened in an ISO dates here. Of course, if you guys want to copy this, it is on my website. Next, we want to make sure that we require specific output format. Make sure that is turned to on, and we connect a structured output parser here, and this JSON is the same as in the prompts: subject, body, email, summary, conversation, tasks, and when they happen. And here on the OpenAI chat model, we're just using GPT-4.0. Next, we need to generate a text file that we can upload to OneDrive. So we do that using this code node right here. Now we grab the transcription from a couple of nodes back and we put it in here. Basically, we're just making a .txt file. Again, this code is on the website. You can copy and paste it. Next, we're checking to see if the call was inbound or outbound, because it will change the name of the file that we create, it will change the folder that we use, and it will change the activity that we create. Then we're telling it to upload a file to a specific folder. Now, here's how you get the folder IDs. If you go over to your OneDrive, open the folder that you want to do, you click copy link, and you paste it in the browser. At the very top, you get this ID right here between the question mark and the slash. That's your folder ID. So you put that right here. Then here, all I'm doing is formatting the name of the file. So this file is going to be like this person called this person right here at this time. That's basically all it says. Okay, and make sure that you're doing a binary file with input field as data, and that field was passed from this generate text file right here. So it'll automatically grab it, turn it into a text file, and upload it to that folder. Now we have to make that text file shareable so anybody on the team can review it if they want to do call reviews. So we jump over here and we say we're using the file resource, and we just say share, and we give pass file ID, and we edit it as scope anonymous so that anybody within the organization can access that file. Good to go. Next, we create the call event in Crelate. Now, this node right here is exactly the same as this node right here, this one right here, as this one right here. They're all exactly the same. The only difference is the data that we're providing. So I'm not going to explain the top part. I'm just going to explain the body. Here, all we're saying is subject from the OpenAI was an inbound call. This person called our representative, this person at this time. It lasted this long, and here's a summary of what they talked about. And then here's a link to the transcription. That's it. Now the only difference between this and this one right here, again, is the order. Instead of them calling us, we called them. This was an outbound call. This representative called this person at this time. Here's a summary, blah, blah, blah. Rest is exactly the same. We're grabbing the contact ID the same way we did before. We're using the same verb ID that we did before. Everything else is the same. And then finally, we're checking to see if any tasks exist. So we check the AI node to see if it outputted any tasks. And if it did, we create those tasks. Now this one is a little bit different. We're using API 3/tasks. That's a different endpoint from Crelate. Again, passing the API key twice. Going down here, and we still have to put the verb ID to the task. Why? I don't know. They have a special endpoint for this activity, but we still have to pass the activity ID. Crelate, what are you doing? That being said, I showed you how to get the verb ID previously, so I won't be explaining how to do that again. Again, we're grabbing the contact ID here. We're saying when the task is due. Now we grab that from the AI, right? We're saying the subject of the task and what the task is, which we grab from the AI output. And then of course, if no task exists, we do nothing. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys would like some more help with N8N, I am hosting a free community to help you guys out. There we have challenges to earn some real cash money. I also answer any question that gets posted in the group. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out the link down below, and you guys have a wonderful day.